All right, so is the housing market about to crash in 2025? Look, with prices rising, affordability shrinking, homeownership is really out of reach for millions of Americans, and interest rates, they're still high. So it's easy to think that everything's headed towards a major correction. In fact, some headlines, they're already calling for it. And we need to look at the data and look at the evidence to actually call this accurately. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the current state of the housing market with the real numbers, the historical trends, and the expert predictions. So we're going to look at what's happening with home prices and whether there's a crash. And they've been telling us for the last 5 years, is this finally happening? So without further ado, let's just jump in. So number one is understanding what's really happening in real estate. So, okay, first off, as of the early part of 2025, the median home price in the United States, it's a little over $425,000. So that's a 3% increase from last year this time. So the year before that, the median was around $387. So yes, it's hard to believe national prices, national level, it's still going up. Maybe not as far as before, and maybe there are places in the nation that are taking a breather and they're taking price reductions. But on a national level, at least, this shows that they haven't stopped rising, which is crazy. I know, and really what many people find crazy is that home prices have gone up even though interest rates are up and buyer demand is actually even lower. So that's because the real estate market just doesn't react like stocks, right? Home prices, they move much slower and they're influenced by a lot of other factors, other long-term factors. And one of the biggest one of those is inflation. So when we look at the numbers and we look at the data, real estate is really what's called a hard asset. It's physical, it's limited. But over time, whether you like it or not, it usually holds value better than if you were holding cash, because cash goes down in value. Think about what your dollar was worth 5 years ago and think about what it was worth today, right? So you think about a house. So when you look at the value of money and it drops as it has over the last decade, the value of real estate, it tends to go up over time. And that's why even with the economy not doing so great, even home prices, they almost always go up in the long term. So it's easy to just think the market is pushing prices higher, but that's the way the whole system works. But really, you get down to this. This is where it is. It doesn't mean that prices can't go down, right? What it does is it makes things really hard right now is the affordability of things, right? And houses. And the problem is, while house prices have gone up a lot over the years, wages, they just have not gone up. And it's a fact. So the average American today simply doesn't have the same buying power as their parents or their grandparents had, even though their incomes may look similar, just if you're looking at stuff on paper, right? So when people say that housing is not affordable, they're 100% absolutely right. And that's just because home prices are expensive and incomes haven't gone up and kept pace with the housing costs. But that leads us to the number two thing. And that's what many people are asking about. Is number two is, when will housing market actually crash, right? People have been talking about this for years. It's going to crash, it's going to crash. So when we look at the current market, yes, home prices, they are creeping up, but in some places, they're bigger increases than other places, and there's regional decreases as well, and that's what you got to look at. So just remember, what's happening in one part of the country may not necessarily be happening in another part of the country. And the reason that this is so true is because real estate is hyper local. It's always been this way and it always will be. It's location, location, location. But the overall national trend, if we look at that, it's been steady. So when you factor in inflation and low inventory and high construction costs, it's not as shocking as it might seem at first. So even if prices are high, and they are to a lot of millions of Americans who just can't afford a house, it doesn't automatically mean that we're headed for a crash because it's out of reach. It's not affordable. You have to keep something in mind, that real estate doesn't act like stocks or crypto, right? It changes slowly. It's tied to inflation. It's tied to supply. And it's hard to get loans and actual physical inventory quickly, right? It takes time. So those fundamentals today are the way they have been. And so if we look back to 2008, because a lot of people compare 2008, right, about the crash, we don't have those speculators that were in real estate like we had back in 2008. Think about this. People were getting mortgages and buying real estate, and they had no business doing so. They were just buy and flip, buy and flip. We aren't seeing that today. So let's talk about what really happened in 2008, because this is a pretty good subject to why things are not the same now. So back then, you look at the two big problems that were driving that crash is, first off, there were way too many houses that were being built all at the same time, and builders were building as many homes as they possibly could. So the housing market got flooded with inventory. And of course, that mortgage meltdown was the other end of that. And there was more inventory than actual demand. And this is what set that stage for the falling prices. And the second thing, this is the important one here, is why there were so many mass foreclosures. Because banks were giving out subprime loans to people who just couldn't really even afford them. No income verification. Think about it. You get a loan, you don't even have to tell them how much money you made. You just tell them, oh, I make buku money. You could have bad credit. You could have risky adjustable rate mortgages. And then when they reset, guess what? It's like musical chairs. Somebody's got to hold the bag, right? And those loan payments increased to much higher payments and people started defaulting. And that's what actually happened in 2008. It was fast. The foreclosures exploded at that point, and with all those homes hitting the market all at once, the prices tanked. That's the fact. Now, let's fast forward to 2025. Today, are we overbuilding? No, we still can't catch up with the amount of people who actually want to buy a house in proper areas. Why are they building so many apartments, guys? Think about this. We still don't have enough houses in most places in the nation. Builders are dealing with higher interest rates and more expensive materials and stricter lending for construction on loans. So they're cautious. They're not just pumping out the freight, guys. So are we going to see mass foreclosures? Not at all. And the fact is this, foreclosure activity is still near record lows when we look at where they've been over the years. Most people who own homes today, they got a fixed rate mortgage. And if they got a mortgage at an interest rate that's super low, like a 3% loan, or they refinanced even to a low loan, nobody's giving that up. So it's going to be harder to get a loan today than it was 15 years ago is the other thing. So people just can't afford it as much house as they did in 2008, and that's inflation. So even if foreclosures do start ticking up, here's the thing, it's going to take years to build inventory and actually even impact the housing market in any kind of a major way, which brings us to this. If a crash was coming, and it's a big if, it wouldn't happen overnight. You could see things happening. Now, there are cracks in the wall, we know that. But look, the 2008 crash, it didn't explode all at once, even though people acted like it did. Look at what happened. Listen, it took nearly 3 years for that market to fully unravel. People were just coming in, they were unraveling. And in about 5 years for it to totally bottom out. So you want to ask yourself, are you ready to wait up to 8 years hoping for a crash? Then you could have the perfect timing. And some viewers on this channel, I get it, they've been telling me that there's a crash coming every single year for the last 6 years. Now, the whole entire time, home prices kept going up. And I know they couldn't afford it then, they really can't afford it now. And that's the point. Many crash gurus who sat on the sidelines waiting for the crash are completely priced out of the market. And I'm not saying anything bad about that, guys, but you can never time the market. I'm just showing the facts of what's going on. So the real question is now the perfect time to buy? No, it's never the perfect time to buy. It's always a bad time because home prices are never cheap enough and your timing is never going to be right. But I will say this, if you need a place to live, it's your time. But if you're happy where you are, then don't do anything, right? But if you're making your decisions based on fear or your prediction from influencers who aren't even in real estate, you're totally missing out on the real opportunities, right? Because the deal of the decade, it happens once a week. Now, not everybody's getting that deal, but there are deals to be had if you know what you're looking for and you know what to stay away from. Now, I understand many people want to hear that the housing crash is just around the corner and you're going to get that steal of a deal on a home of your dreams. And that's really what people have been waiting for. And I'm talking year after year after year while prices kept going up. But the reality, it's a lot more complicated. Look, if we take a look at some sections of America and look at Florida, because this is a good example, a lot of people point to it as a sign that the market is about to turn. And it is showing an inventory surge. There are more listings in Florida. There are more days on the market. And yep, it is happening. But if someone bought a house in Florida, let's say in 2019, for $275,000, and they decide to sell now, and they're selling it for $700,000, the prices are still high by comparison. And that's where the confusion comes in. So what is really happening? Some markets, again, like Florida and other states, home sellers are also cutting their prices. And that's because they're asking way too much to begin with. And maybe they bought at the height of the market and they just want to get out because the cost of living turns out to be a lot higher than they expected. Insurance and taxes and that sort of thing. So that's what we're seeing right now. And I know it's not what many of you want to hear. You want to hear that we're going to get this massive wave of foreclosures. But a lot of retired people, for example, let's go back to Florida. A lot of homeowners in Florida, they paid cash cash. They don't have a mortgage. So even if that house doesn't sell right away, they're not going into foreclosure. They bought it for $275 and they're sitting on a property worth, $500, $600, $700, whatever it is. They got equity and they've got time. So however you look at it, but I want to tell you one thing. If you're looking at condos, however, if you look at condos in Florida, it's a totally different story because condos in Florida in 2025, they come with a whole nother set of challenges that a potential buyer should really carefully consider. And those Florida condos could indeed be crashing, and there's many other problems with them, but I have many other videos here on this channel that's about that. But here's my final thoughts. So I just want you to think about this. So to answer the question, is there going to be a housing crash in 2025? And the thing is, the housing market is very different in local areas everywhere in the nation. So again, what's happening with the whole country may not be happening in your town or necessarily in your neighborhood. Places where houses and prices went up in 2022 a lot, or 2023, might see prices go down a bit as things start to calm down. But in places where there aren't many houses for sale and you see all these new apartment buildings being built, and any place where people have good jobs and there's still a lot of buyers, the prices are staying pretty stable. So when someone's actually saying the housing market's going to crash, so you got to ask where exactly? Because when you actually look at the data across the country, as crazy as it seems, but on a national level, the big crash is not happening. So I got a question for you. Did you find any of this information helpful? Did you think that there's still a crash coming? Put it in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. Put your data behind it. Then go ahead and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this here on this channel. And if you have questions or stories to share, put them in the comments below. If you have questions, we have answers. It's Jerry with Jerry Pinkas Real Estate Experts, 843-839-9870. And until next time, stay happy, stay educated, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, guys.